the virtual M Room. As a reminder, we are recording this session so that folks who aren't able to join us can access the recording and also some resources that we will be providing, both of which will be on our website. So again, thank you for joining us. My name is Clara Bowie, Associate Director for the Office of Multicultural Affairs, and we're really excited to have this conversation today. We have some special guests in the room that will be having a conversation on talking about raising race-conscious children and how to have these types of conversations, or how to talk to kids about navigating their identities and the world around them. As a caveat, this special guest is my daughter, Charlize Bowie, and we're really, really excited to have her join us. Really proud of the fact that she's able to even, be here and share her thoughts with us. So just a big thank you to Charlize and Chris, who is the graduate assistant in our office, who is going to be moderating the discussion with Charlize. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started with this particular session. The first, we are going to be really listening in to the conversation that Chris and Charlize will be having. So very similar to a fishbowl, allowing us as the audience to listen to her thoughts and her lived experiences and navigating the questions that Chris will be sharing as well. Once they're done with that, then we will open it up for audience questions. Now, this will be a little bit different than we've done in the past as well. One thing that I'm going to ask is that if you have questions, that they be broader questions, personal questions to Charlize, as she is a minor. I would really ask that you refrain from just being, the comfort level of being a preteen in this space is a bit intimidating, but also I would really insist on respecting her privacy. As her mother, though, I will jump in. If there are questions that I can help answer, I will certainly be there to do that as well. So without further ado, I'm going to have Chris and Charlize take it away.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be having this conversation and for Charlize to be joining in as well. And a little bit about me and how I came along this topic. I am entering into my 4th year in the counseling psych program. Quite a few years back in Miami, I worked with researchers on racial socialization, basically working with kids, talking with them and having discussions about their race, how they view themselves, how they view the world, and then how that impacts their view and their self-esteem as well. I am going to let Charlize introduce herself, and then we're gonna go ahead and get started. Charlize?
Hey everyone, my name is Charlize. My preferred pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm 13 years old and I'm going into eighth grade this year. I play softball for Easton and I dance competitively, and I identify as an Afro-Latina, which means I'm African-American, Dominican, and Puerto Rican. And I'm very much excited to have this conversation. So thank you so much, Chris, for letting me do this with you.
Of course. And what I'm hoping that some of you may gain from this discussion, from this conversation, is taking notes on maybe what are some of the things that may work for your household in terms of having a discussion with your child or even with your students. And what are the questions that you may want to ask or that you may want to reflect upon yourself, okay? With that being said, Charlize, would you like to share with us what was your first memory of even understanding or knowing what is race or ethnicity for yourself?
Yes, so at a very early age, I was very well aware that everyone has different skin tones and that not everyone looks like me. And so I could I could pretty much say that my family has a variety of different skin tones. One early memory that I have is that I would used to identify each of us with our skin tones as like something sweet and delicious. So my sister, she has a lighter complexion, and I would say she would be white chocolate, and my mom would be the same because they have a fair skin tone. And then I would be caramel, and then my brother, who's a bit darker than me, he would be milk chocolate, and so would my father. So that's a little sweet memory that I have, just kind of identifying that not everyone looks the same and like kind of being aware of race.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And you brought up something interesting, which is the um, different skin tones among siblings. How has that been like for you, that experience?
Mhm. Yeah. So I had to kind of realize that my mother, who is a bit lighter, and my father is a bit darker, that we're not all going to look the same, and that's beautiful. So at a very early age, I was well aware that even though my sister is a bit lighter than me, she's still the same as me in the inside, and that's what's beautiful.
Mhm. And what are some of the things that you have picked up? Because you mentioned some things that your family have taught you. What are some things that have stuck with you along the way?
Yes. So my mother, she is very aware that she wants to make sure that my sister and I, and even my brother as well, that we know that our skin tone and our background is very much, appreciated. And she always tells us that it's beautiful. And when it comes to our skin tone, she's always saying different things like, you're beautiful and that you're just gorgeous every now and then. And those little things really brought us up. So I think that in my household, that everyone should at least have that type of recognition. And so that's very important.
And I agree. And what has it been like at school? Have you had similar experiences at school?
Not exactly. So I have been in spaces where I have a lot of white peers. And so I had to adjust to the fact that I am a bit displaced in some environments. And so it is a bit harder to acknowledge that I'm going to be, that Black student. And so in a
Mhm.
space where I have so many white peers, I had to kind of adjust from my at home being, praised for having, such a beautiful skin tone. And then coming into a space where I have lots of white peers and then kind of feeling, you know, is this okay? And like, I kind of feel displaced or different, which I
Mm,
didn't really identify as like a good thing, I guess, in that situation.
mhm. Can you tell us more about what you mean as not identifying that as a good thing?
So one thing that I always have to, get used to is whenever we come around Black History Month, I kind of felt kind of uncomfortable when we talked about, slavery because there were so many white peers around me and I kind of felt like they were expecting me to react a certain way. And so I didn't really necessarily like think that it was a good thing to be here and like just, you know, it just felt very different. And it felt like that because of my skin tone, I was treated differently. And whenever we came around that topic, I kind of felt smaller than the rest of my classmates.
Mm. And that feeling, especially in an environment that is supposed to be so natural, like that can be extremely difficult. And I don't know if you can relate, but it can oftentimes be difficult to pinpoint what exactly
Yeah.
causes that feeling of discomfort, or feeling of being tokenized, or even feeling pressured to be the one to come up with the response, anytime some of these months of that are supposed to be a cultural celebration, but place a certain pressure.
Hmm.
Um, and we've talked a lot about skin tone. I'm curious about hair texture as well. I grew up with curly hair, going to Dominican hair salons, and depending on whether I had my hair straightened or curly, or up in a bun, it seemed like someone always had an opinion.
Hmm.
What was it like for you?
I felt like my hair had two different personalities, one at school and then one at home, where it's a much safer environment. And so at home, we have like this little ritual or this little tradition that we do. Every Sunday would be a hair day. And
Mhm.
so we would wash our hair, we tried different hairstyles, and it would be for me and my sister. And my mother would just, just tell us how beautiful it is and tell us what we can do to like make it more healthy. And so it's a very safe environment. And we tried many different hairstyles. And I thought in my head, these are such beautiful hairstyles, but is it something I would want to wear at school where not a lot of kids have the same hair texture as me? And so when I come to school, I'm a bit more self-conscious. So one thing that I've always been self-conscious about is if I'm going to wear my hair out at school, there's always this feeling of being looked at a certain way or like not being as normalized as the other girls in my
Mhm.
class. And so there was two different sides that I had to think of. The hairstyles that I liked and actually felt confident in, is this something I could wear at school? Or is this something
Mhm.
I would only be comfortable wearing at home?
Mm. And how, I'm guessing, how old were you, if you had to take a guess, when you first started noticing that you had to make those kinds of decisions?
I think probably when I was about 7 or 8, because I wasn't in an environment where there were lots of white peers. Actually, I was in a Catholic school where lots of kids actually looked like me and had the hair texture as I did. So I was kind of used to just wearing my hair normally, like in any hairstyle that I felt confident in, because I was a bit younger and I was more confident in that. But once I grew older and when I moved to a different district, it kind of just altered the way I thought about my hair.
Mm. What do you think, if you had to guess, changed, or what do you think was the difference?
The difference for me was the lack of people who look like me. I was just surrounded by so many kids who had much looser curls and straight hair and fair skin tones. And so when I came into the scene with my hair in a certain hairstyle that isn't normally what you would see, I kind of
Mm-hmm.
felt like, kind of displaced. And so that started happening around third grade, and it's still up to right now. I'm still in the same district. So there's a lot of, it's predominantly white in the district that I'm at. So it's very hard for girls like me to wear their hair in certain hairstyles without feeling that they're going to get stared at or act like we're on a museum. Like, oh my gosh, your hair is so curly, and just touching it. And so it kind of makes us feel like, why can't we just wear our hair normal, like the way you do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could relate a lot to that. I've also had experiences where individuals have shared with me how they prefer my hair to be. Oh, I prefer your hair this way, or I prefer your hair that way, and I'm like, a compliment would suffice. But even thinking about this idea that someone would come up to you and, hold down your hair, hold down your
Yeah.
curls.
Hmm.
Um, and even this idea of like feeling like a museum. Um, yeah. And how have you kind of gotten through that? Or is this still a much a journey for you?
Yeah, one thing that I've had to identify is that this is a journey for me and that it's going to be a very long journey, because the journey doesn't have to end. And for me, it's just about being aware of how beautiful it is, whether I'm in the mirror looking at myself and just loving the hair texture, or whether I'm at school and I'm not really aware of what it looks like from a different perspective. And so it's just a very long journey of self awareness. And so I think that's what everyone has to go through, that it's not just going to be a certain period where you just realize, and it's just going to have to take a bit longer. And depending on the person and their experience, it's going to be a different time length. And so for me, it's been all throughout my life, and I have to still accept the fact that it's not going to end just as quickly as I thought it would.
Yeah. And what advice would you give to your younger sister, or even cousins, as they are going through their own journey?
Through their own journey, I would give the advice that you should just touch your hair, feel the different textures, and whether or not it's as coarse or as soft, or the different curl textures and coils and kinks, just touch your hair. Just, you know, feel that part of yourself, because it's such a huge part of yourself. And so for my sister especially, I'm always telling her that you have such long and beautiful hair and that she needs to like experience it, just put it in different hairstyles and just touch it, feel one and the same with it. Because once you touch it, then you can really feel how unique it is because everyone's hair texture is unique. And that touching it is like really connecting to you.
Yeah, and I think I keep being taken away or taken back by like your self-awareness, and admittedly I know myself, like I was not there. It took me well into adulthood to be to have the level even close to self-awareness that you have, and to even, it's amazing to me to even do so or have that self-awareness when thinking about all the pressures and being in a school environment, how difficult that can be. I'm curious, do you and your friends talk about hair texture and skin tone and some of the things that you've noticed?
Um, Honestly, no. We just talk about normal, not normal things, but things that typical 13-year-old girls would talk about. And honestly, I wish that we would talk more about that type of stuff because my friends, they look like me, and just talking about it would just be a lot more easing to like when I'm at school or when I'm in an environment where I'm not as, self-aware. And so talking about it would just be a lot more comfortable, but unfortunately we don't talk about that stuff, and I'm wondering if it's because of the three of us or if it's because they're not ready to have that type of conversation.
Mhm. What, and I know that you meant it as a slip, that whole normal,
Hmm.
but something that is so weaved in our lives, it's not normalized, these experiences that every day we walk through. um, and so what do you think helps you feel more comfortable having these conversations?
One thing that makes me feel more comfortable to have these conversations is that knowing that not everyone has the same experience as me and that it's okay to just listen and it's okay to not know exactly what to say. And so if we were to ever have a conversation about our skin tone and personal experiences, I just have to be aware that it's not going to be what I expect, or just to to respect everyone's personal experience. So even if we don't have those conversations, I would be okay with it because I know that not everyone is emotionally there. And I think that's something everyone has to respect.
Yeah, and I can imagine that being a lonely place as well,
Hmm.
when you're feeling ready, and your peers maybe not.
Yeah.
Um, can you think of an example of something that you would like to talk with your peers, but you haven't had the opportunity or space to do so?
Yeah, especially during, for example, the presidential election, something like that is kind of putting people in an anxious spot. Like, what if someone doesn't respect my opinions? Or you just can't have that type of conversation because not everyone is as mature to have that conversation. And it kind of be as some people would act in a silly way, kind of just because they're anxious. And so having those type of conversations that I'm honestly used to at the dinner table wouldn't be the same for some of my other peers. And so in situations at school, when I have to be like, okay, I can't exactly have this conversation with so and so, but I'll respect that I can't because not everyone is on the same level of, being able to handle that type of conversation.
Mhm. And now I'm curious of, and this is, sorry if it's giving a peek into Clara's life, but what are dinner table conversations like?
They're very open, to be honest. So if my dad sees something on his phone and it's quite interesting and he wants to talk about it, he can. And
Mhm.
it's just the fact that he can that makes it much more comfortable. So when I mean that he can, it's that he knows that we can interpret what he's saying in a mature way so that we're not twisting his words in a certain way. So we just can have conversations like people at a just having a conversation, not an adult and a child, but more like people just having a conversation that isn't to the extreme, but it's also not sugar coated. And so the fact that my family can have conversations about race and politics, it's just the fact that it just makes me realize that I have a very open family that can talk about things. And I think that's one of the main reasons why I'm able to have these type of conversations with people outside my family.
Yeah, and recognizing that these conversations oftentimes can be difficult to have. I know Renee
Mhm.
has given numerous discussions on dialogues and how to have dialogues with families because it can be so difficult. But can you tell us about one of your favorite dinner table conversations?
Honestly, we have so many, and usually they all end up in laughs, depending, no matter what the conversation is, because it just has that certain type of feel. Like it's okay to have those types of conversations that may be a bit more mature, but we'll always end up having that laugh. So I can't exactly think of a specific one, but I know that all different types of conversations that I have with my family are my favorite because it's a safe spot. So I know that I can voice my opinions, but thinking about it right now, actually, it's one of those conversations that I've had to really voice my opinion on. And they're very mature topics, actually. Like um, when it comes to trans people and like their disadvantages, I remember this one topic that was very much heated between my father and I just felt very passionate about that topic. And so I guess that I would say that's one of my favorites because I felt very much in the conversations just like my mother would. And it was just me and my father, just, and as well as my mother, just going back and forth about different perspectives and stuff. And so I really felt that I had a place in that conversation and that I was actually getting through to him. So that was a very, one of my favorite conversations.
Yeah, it sounds like you were heard.
Yeah.
And that your what you had to say was taken seriously
Hmm.
and valued. And I think that that is very important. That no matter the age, here's your opinion, and you don't have to agree, um, but it is very much valued. Um,
Hmm.
yeah. I'm sorry. Did you have another?
Yeah, one thing when you're saying that, it made me think that it made me feel so good to actually have my father and your adult just respect my opinion. And I think that's something a lot of kids would like, just so that they can be heard, not as a child who may not have the most uh the best opinion. I'm not really sure, but like just to have a child, not they're not going to be identified as the child, but as another person who has an opinion and they just want to be heard. So when I had that feeling, I think that's why I made it one of my favorite conversations, because I felt like I was just another person having a heated conversation with another person, not a child and their father, but just, just me and my dad just having conversation. And I just felt heard. And that felt really good.
Yeah. And I'm glad you have that. And I'm curious if any how is it helpful when you maybe are not in such a safe environment,
Mhm.
um, or if you're not in an environment like school, how are these conversations helpful?
When those types of conversations are helpful in different environments, I feel like it makes the individual feel a lot more confident in their opinion, so that they don't have to feel like what they're going to say will come across as, silly or something that people won't actually understand. So if we have those types of conversations where the people who are talking are equivalent, then I feel like the individual who will mainly feel a lot more smaller in the conversation normally would actually
Yeah.
have a lot more confidence coming across. And I feel like if we had those types of conversations in school with the teacher and the student will feel that they're not just the student, they're just another person in the conversation. So it's not just taking it at home, but it's everywhere they go, just making sure that their voice is heard and that it's just as relevant as the other.
Yeah, and that it matters.
Mhm.
I think that there are times where it can be difficult, but what I think what you described oftentimes is this safe space, and you keep using this word safe, that really stands out, because here is this space for you that you can always come back to no matter what happens out there in the world. And so I think you're giving us a little bit of insight into how do we have that safe space for students and for children of color as they step out into the world, that may not be so receptive of their opinion or value them as much.
Yeah.
So I'm also curious about how have you and your family navigated discussions or topics, for instance, that have been really difficult or could be difficult, like for instance, the murder of George Floyd, or even discussions on police and policies.
Mhm. Our conversations about that type of stuff are always not in a solemn type of mood, but also about kind of reassuring us that it's okay to have those types of feelings that you're feeling. So if you're feeling really angry, if you're feeling angry, or if you're feeling some sort of way, it's okay to feel that way. So I feel like my family navigates that by making sure that it's okay to feel a certain way. And I feel like every kid should have that type of reassurance, so that if they're feeling a certain way, if they're not feeling, the way they should, I think that people should have that type of reassurance that it's okay to feel a certain way. And so I feel like my family really was able to tell me and my siblings that it's a very mature topic, and depending on the way you're feeling, it's okay, because it's something that not a lot of people handle the same way. And so I think that's a very important part of how my family navigates that.
Mm. And how has that been helpful for you, or in what ways? If you can give us an example.
So when we first had that topic about what happened to George Floyd, I remember feeling just, what can I do? I feel so small, and I don't know what I can do to make a difference. And so I felt just very insignificant, because even just a 13-year-old girl, what could I do to help make a difference? And so I remember feeling very small, but I also remember my family reassuring me that it's okay, and that even though it's such a mature topic, they know that I will be able to handle it. And so I remember that a couple of weeks or days later, we actually went to our first BLM protest, and it was for George Floyd. And I remember feeling so, not powerful, but like a lot more confident, and like bigger, like as a bigger person. And I think that it kind of built upon that insignificance, and the fact that they were able to identify that, to identify the way I was feeling. They were able to build on that and be like, okay, we know that you're mature enough to do this. And even though you were feeling insignificant, let's give you a taste of what you could do, or what you have the capability of doing. And so I think that's what every family needs to do, just to identify how the person is feeling at first, and building upon that to give them, a more outlook of what they have the capability of doing. Like how I was able to feel so much more heard at that protest, and how even as a 13-year-old girl, I still made a difference, and I felt that my voice was very much heard.
Wow, that's powerful. Yeah, I don't even have words to say. Even like your tone and the voice that you took as you described this, like you could see that this an eventful time for you, and a point where you learned a few things in terms of what does advocacy look like, and what do you do when you feel helpless, and even acknowledging that at 13, so young, you are wanting to engage, you are wanting to do something, and looking towards that. That's amazing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Um, so Clara had shared with me that she has quite the children's book collection. Um, and I'm wondering if you can share with us any memories that you may have from any of those books, and what maybe things that stuck with you.
Yeah, so I remember every day that before bed, we would sit in a little circle and she would just read to us these different books. And they were, looking back at it now, I didn't really realize at the time that they were just so diverse, because obviously it was just normal for me to see people from different backgrounds and different cultures. And honestly, just pinpointing a certain book would kind of feel like I had to choose, but just realizing that at a time where I was so young, it just felt normal. And I think that every kid should have that type of experience, that just seeing, let's say, a kid from the Middle East just having a story about them, or a kid in Alabama having a story about them, or any type of little kid or any type of person having a story about them, and just reading it to children, it just makes it seem like it's normal to have
Mhm.
all these different kids of different colors and skin tones and ethnic backgrounds. It should be normal, not just reading about one type of girl who has straight hair and is a pretty princess or whatever. We should have that type of um, image, that not everyone looks the same, and that's what makes it a unique
Mhm.
story. And so I had that as a child growing up, and there were so many different types of books I was able to look back on and read and be like, wow, I read so many great books as a child. And I think that's one of the reasons why I am the way I am today.
Yeah, and I think you're also speaking about the importance of representation and the
Yes. Yeah.
impact that having that representation had
Hmm.
in your life, and in a way that wasn't even in a way that was seemed unconscious, like you weren't fully aware of it, and didn't see the impact till very much later on.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm also thinking a way quite the opposite of what it's like for kids who don't get to see that representation, and what it means for them to see, as you shared, all these princes with straight hair and everything. Um, I have a picture of my cousin, and she loves Anna and Elsa and always sings "Let It Go." I'm over the song. It's been too many years, but she took the kitchen towel and put a headband over it. And my other cousin, I had a head wrap, took the head wrap, and which was brown, and I forgot who was the brunette, Anna or Elsa, and wrapped it around and was swinging it around. And for them, it wasn't even the color or the texture; it was also the length. Um, and wanting to have the length, and looking at their books and seeing that there wasn't a lot of representation. So I think it's understandable to have that, I don't know,
Hmm.
desire. Yeah.
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 Hmm.
Um, I want to just close off because I want to be mindful of questions that other individuals may have. But if you can share with us, like, what is maybe something that you hope that someone may take away for this conversation, or any thoughts that you may have for everyone who had joined us today.
Yeah, I feel like if anyone were to get something out of this conversation, it would be that the voice of your child is very much important, and that you should listen to their needs and their wants, because you may not know what how much capability they have inside them. And that just listening, just being a listener, just like how they're a listener to you, is just as important. And so when you give that sort of assertiveness to your child, it makes them feel like they are a lot more respected. And when you give that to your child, it's just you're just building a lot stronger relationship. And so whether it's about race or politics, just make sure you are informing them and making sure that they're mature to have that type of conversation, but also making sure that they can also be included with those type of topics, and that their voice is just, you'll never know how important and how impactful it is until you've actually listened.
Mm. Powerful words. Thank you so much, Charlize.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I don't know, Claire, if you want to move on to the questions.
Yeah, thank you both so much for that conversation. I learned some things as well, even though I have the privilege and honor to have Charlize in my house and talk to her all the time. But being able to hear the impact of the things that we do, and honestly, it's not a book; it's a day-by-day play book that we just try, as Charlize said, to respect them as children, but also listen and involve them and hear their voice. And I'm glad that that's coming through. Charlize, so proud of you. I tell you all the time, so proud of you. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And Chris, you were just so thoughtful. As a parent, I really appreciate the questions and the way that you handled that conversation. So thank you. Thank you so much for that. So at this point, we're going to open it up again to anyone who has any comments or questions. Once again, just as a reminder, Charlize is a minor, so I would really appreciate direct personal questions to be taken into consideration. But if there are some broader questions, and Charlize, if you want to chime into some of those questions, please feel free to do so. But keeping in mind her age is something that I'd like everyone to hold that respect. So I see that Nancy has her hand up. So Nancy, please feel free to unmute.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if I should write in the chat or so I decided first. Okay. So I kind of had a question, and this is for Charlize, but it could be for others as well. So Charlize, when you were talking about Black History Month and that sense that you sort of felt a little bit uncomfortable, and Chris mentioned like maybe it's hard to say exactly why it was uncomfortable, but you felt uncomfortable. I just wanted to know, have you ever had an experience where one of your friends did something to make that better? Or can you imagine a way one of your friends could have done something to make that feel better for you? And as I said, that's for Charlize, but for anyone else who's been in a similar situation as well.
So, yeah, I remember feeling very much discomforted in those types of situations. So if a friend of mine, no matter the race, if they would come up to me or just see that I'm feeling uncomfortable and just kind of be aware, that would feel a lot more comforting. So like if they would come up to me and be reassuring and be like, hey, I know, or not exactly I know, but I'm here for you, and that I understand the type of discomfort you're coming from. And even if they don't understand, just coming up to me and being like, that's in the past. I just want you to know that I'm not that type of person, or just kind of, reassuring people or kids like me who are being a bit, who feel and are showing off signs that they're a bit uncomfortable. So just being aware of that person's feelings and just, reassuring them, talking to them, making them feel heard. Just even as a child in a classroom, just being aware and knowing that it's going to be a difficult conversation, especially for kids of color, that it's okay to just come up and be like, hey, I just want you to know that I'm here for you, and that in this type of month, I am going to be respecting you, and that I should always be respecting you, and that type of stuff. So just even in a classroom, I'm just thinking to myself, would a random kid, white peer in my class, come up to me and be like, hey, I saw that you were feeling a bit uncomfortable. It's kind of like, wow, could I actually imagine that in my classroom? Would that actually happen? And so I'm really thinking to myself, could that happen? And I'm not sure if it will, but if it does, that I would feel a lot better. And just coming out of that, I would feel a lot more reassured and just be a lot surprised that a kid had that type of power to just come up and, acknowledge the fact that they were feeling uncomfortable. So if any student were to do that, just being aware, I think that's what I would love to see out of that. Just being aware.
I think those moments, I think those moments where someone comes up to you and says, "Did you notice that? Listen, you may not have felt this way, but this is what I picked up. Did you get that when this happened?" And having that sort of like solidarity and that, like you mentioned, self-awareness and even sharing in that is powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question, Nancy. Is it Betsy or
Yes, it's Betsy. I'm not sure how that happened when a typo when I put it in, I think.
Right.
Charlize, I just wanted to say, first of all, and someone just wrote this in the chat too, you are amazingly mature for your age. And I don't think there's a single person on this call who is not just floored and impressed by what you just did at age 13. So that wonderful, wonderful job. And I am a mom of a 13-year-old who's going to be going into 8th grade as well. So I came here because of the topic, and I thought it was a very interesting topic. I didn't actually know you were going to speak. And as you started speaking, I was even more interested in it. And I just want to say, I love the fact that you are saying how important it is to you to be recognized, your voice recognized, to be really heard, that yes, you're still, kind of a kid, but you're not a kid, and it's awesome that your family is doing that. I try to do the same thing with my daughter, and she says that same thing to me all the time, Mom, I'm a person too. I need to hear this. So we often have those dinner type conversations as well. And I think this is recorded, and I think I'm probably going to show her this because it is amazing. And I don't really have a question. I just wanted to say you're awesome.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for that. Rhea, I see your hand up.
Hi, yes, I just want to say that I am I appreciate this conversation, and I'm happy that we're having this conversation. I appreciate Charlize just being there and having this conversation as well, because I know we all know the importance of having the younger generation and their voices being heard. And I have a 15-year-old son, and we were just having a conversation with his name is Levi, and we were having a conversation on Saturday about race and complexion. And so and one of the things, and it was really, really disturbing because there are a couple of things. So it was really disturbing because of the fact that the whole idea of a dark-skinned person versus a light-skinned person, I'm not talking about a light-skinned Black or anything. I'm just talking about a Black person versus a white person and the preference. And the reason why they're saying that they prefer a white person. And again, I just wanna say that he has a diverse group of friends. So they are Black and they're white and Hispanic. And so he has a diverse group of friends, and they felt free to talk to me about this issue. And so the conversation was disturbing. And so therefore, because we're having this conversation now, it would be so great if we can get a group of young kids, and this should be maybe even in the schools or maybe part of the curriculum, to have a conversation like this with the younger generation and making it maybe something, again, within the curriculum, but having this conversation within the schools, because it's extremely, extremely important because of the simple fact that the media plays a crucial part, the environment. Not everybody is like, Charlize and my son, whereas they are exposed to certain conversations and a certain type of environment. And so therefore, not all of them are fortunate, when it comes to that. So I think it's extremely important to not only have Charlize in the room, but also have other kids that represent that is representative of what she's conveying. A question that I concerning the hair, again, it's my son, and he doesn't feel any way when it comes to his hair or anything like that. And I don't know if it's because he's a boy, but when I, I had bought these DVDs and we used to look at Soul Train. And once he started looking at Soul Train, he wanted to have an afro. And he still wants to have one. And I told him that he didn't know how to take care of his afro. When he got older, he can have it. Right now, his hair is his long, and so he's 15, so I leave it as that. But and again, he experienced the same thing, as far as touching and things like that. But do you think that boys and girls experience it? And I probably know the answer to this. And do you think boys and girls have that same experience, when it comes to their hair? Because again, my son, he does, he wants to have an afro. He likes his hair the way it is.
Yeah, so I have very similar conversations with my brother, and sometimes I have to kind of, not go off on him, but I get very passionate about the topic. He's not aware of how impactful it is for girls like me to just wear their hair out to school. He thinks it's just normal, and I love that he thinks it's just normal. And so whenever I say, "Oh, I can't just wear my hair out like my white female peers," and he's like, "Why not? Like, I don't understand." And so I'm not sure if it depends on the hair texture and, their personal experience, because my brother has very short hair and he's always brushing it and stuff. And so I don't think that I don't think that he has the same awareness because he's never had to actually feel the hair texture. And it's kind of just very, not dormant, but like he doesn't have to put as much effort into it as I do or as other boys of his color do. But I feel that it depends because I have to sometimes tell him that it's not just as simple as, as other kids. And so I think that it depends on how he feels or on how anyone feels about their hair. And so if it's just another normal thing, then maybe it's not a big deal compared to, my experience. But if they wear their hair out and they're not as sure, I think that we do have the same type of feelings when it comes to that. But yeah, I do remember having lots of conversations with my brother and just telling him that it's not as simple as he thinks it is.
If I could chime in too here, so I love that question. As a parent, it is so difficult to just let go sometimes and say, you're not going to be able to know how to do such and such, and particularly when it comes to hair. But one thing that I've learned from Charlize is like, she has to experiment. She has to, sometimes fail, sometimes be super confident in the things that she does. But what I can do in the background is provide her with resources, whether it be, different types of products that are, available for natural hair that would be a good thing for her to bring in, or even, pictures and different types of videos on tutorials on how to do that, right? But giving her the confidence to try it out herself so that she's able to have that experience, and whether it's a win or not, it's still her own experience and her own journey with her hair.
It's so funny that you said that because my son, he doesn't want, I said, why don't you put something in your hair because it's dry, it's this. He doesn't want anything in his hair. He said it's just natural, he thinks, sprays and all that stuff with chemicals or hair oil or something with chemicals. And he washes his hair and he leaves it and that's it.
Yeah. And there's a big difference, I think, between chemicals and products to help moisturize and keep your hair healthy. So that's something that I also reinforce is the health of the hair. And these products are helping the health of your hair, not changing the texture of your hair.
Right.
Yes. Different things there.
Right. Exactly. And he doesn't understand. He thinks it doesn't matter. Everything is a chemical to him as far as he's concerned. And I think boys and girls are just different when it comes to, with their hair.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. And I see Bel Canto.
Yeah, hi, that's not actually my name. My name's Joy Hirakawa. I'm the artistic director for Belcanto Youth Chorus, which is associated, we're under the Bach Choir of Bethlehem. And we've been doing, I have a huge interest in this topic, and we've been doing a lot of work this past year, especially diving into using music to look at social justice issues, and in particularly through the lens of the Underground Railroad. It was our story that we went through. But I'm here because I have a real interest in this, and I really think that this is a wonderful conversation. And again, kudos to Charlize. I'm just floored. You're so articulate, and Mom, you must be so proud. And clearly, you've had a wonderful home experience. So congratulations. My question is coming from a teacher point of view. You are so articulate about saying how you like during Black History Month, and I particularly think for those of us who are white and educators and care very deeply, and we want to do the right thing, and we want to be the best teacher we can be for all of our students, and the fact that you're saying, oh, it was some, things come up and you get uncomfortable. So my question is, what do you sit there wishing your teachers would be doing or saying, or what do you wish they would do as you're sitting there in the midst of this conversation, to make it not such a um, the elephant in the room to talk about?
Mhm. Yeah, so I totally get what you're saying. And one thing that I wish that they would do is just to move away from the same people. Like, no offense, but just like moving away from Dr. Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and the Underground Railroad, because that it's just a repetitive thing. And it's just like, okay. And I'm feeling that not just people of my peers of color are feeling the same way, just my other white peers. And so I feel like just moving away from that and kind of diving deeper to like different people who have made such an impact on our society and on entertainment, and just making it seem a lot more interesting and fun, and other than just saying the same thing, because I know that's like very deeply embedded into the curriculum, but like just kind of changing it, but not changing it, but like making sure that it's a lot different, and that making sure that the kids have a better understanding that it's not just these people who have made an impact. There's so many others, and that it's not just for the civil rights movement. It's not just that. It's for people like Bessie Coleman and what's her name? I forget her name, but she created a very impactful hairstyling product. I forget what it was, but and people like that, just not just for civil rights and just like that, but in so many. There's like, my point is that there's so many other people, and in entertainment, in sciences, and in other different parts. I'm sorry, I'm rambling right here, but but just making sure that there's other people, and just really making sure that, because when you do that, that it's so much more interesting for the student and for the teacher. And so if you're saying, if you have a high interest in football, or like pop culture or whatever, just making sure that you can see the diversity in that as well, because it's so much more important than to acknowledge that we have a wide variety of accomplishments in our history. And so, like, not just stepping away from that, from the repetition.
Mhm.
Thank you. I'd add to that, there are a lot of African American, and I'm putting in classical, in quotes, classical composers, who
Mm-hmm.
are writing in a more Western art music style, that are starting to really be elevated, which I'm very excited to see that is becoming much more part of the repertoire. So thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. You're
I
welcome.
would add to that within schools of, reframing it in terms of quote unquote doing the right thing, but ensuring of how can I be more inclusive, and looking at the curriculum, looking even at what are the outfits that are expected to be worn during recitals. What is the language that is being used? So all of these things are all of these being things that are that can be looked at through as an educator, to ensure that you're being inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
And one more thing that I will add too is that let's add some of that into the curriculum year round. Why does it only have to be during Heritage Month? There's so much that can be added within the subject matter that can be presented by so many folks of color that have been high contributors, or even at the forefront of a lot of these things that we can share with the students, so that it doesn't have to just be in this container in just 1 month. It needs to be much more included into the curriculum overall. There is a question in the comment. So it's Charlize. It's a great presentation and we enjoy it very much. You mentioned you like to read. Is there any collection or book that you can recommend? Now, I know you love to read. It's not even like to read, you love to read. So you want to share some of the titles of some things that you are just absolutely loving to, there you go.
Okay, so this is my absolute favorite series. There's only 2 books, but Children of Blood and Bone, I'm telling you, this is the best of the best here. It's amazing. It's by Tomi Adeyemi, and it's kind of mythical, and it's not in real life, but it's so interesting, and I just fell in love with it. And it's a really thick book, but there's 2 of them. There's another one called Children of Virtue and Vengeance, and it's kind of like it's together, and it's so interesting, but it's also just look at this cover, it's gorgeous. And so these books are amazing. And so if you were ever thinking of like adding to your library at school or anywhere, or if you just want to read out of pleasure, it's an amazing book, and I just love it. So it's great.
Thank you. Ms. Ray, you had another question?
Yes, I do. I was reading an article in Forbes magazine, and they wrote about should kids be taught history at an earlier age, and again dealing with Black history and so forth. And do you think that would help with the situation? Because again, people are saying, their minds are too young for that, and they shouldn't be, taught about those things. And so and this could just not only be for Charlize, but just for everyone as well. Should it be taught at an earlier age, as opposed to waiting just for Black History Month, or waiting until you get, into middle school or something like that?
I'm gonna jump in here and put another link. So I have included 2 links. I think that's a very good question. I've included 2 links. The second one that I posted is from the American Psychological Association, and it has a list of book recommendations at any age. And the first link that I put are questions from a very early age that you can start asking, to elementary school, till middle school, to even during teenagers. So I think thinking about what is appropriate for the child, developmentally appropriate, but it can be, you can have these conversations at any age. And I don't know if Clara want to share how she navigated early on.
Yeah, I mean, first I want to say that it's not just me, right? Dad has a lot to do with this as well. He is a 4th grade teacher, and he
5th grade.
5th grade, sorry, thank you. 5th grade, he did teach in 4th grade. There he is. Hi, hi, Curtis. So I actually want to turn it over to Curtis. What do you think about that question, and what do you do in your classroom with your 5th graders?
Sorry, Curtis, I left you out.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that your children are never too young to discuss race. As a 5th grade teacher, I try to incorporate into our curriculum, not just on Black History Month, but throughout the year, so that it feels natural and normal. And the students are very receptive to it. We've talked about a variety of social justice issues in class, and you'd be surprised what children observe and what they're able to articulate themselves and understand about the world around them. So don't wait, until later. Talk to them now. see what their feelings are, how they see the world. And they're going to need that, because they probably have tons of questions. They see the news, they hear what's going on, they see the posters, so they definitely have something to add to the conversation. And with children, they're so innocent. They're not sugarcoating anything, they're just telling you how they feel. So I encourage everyone to have those conversations with your kids, with your students, and you'll be surprised how enriching those conversations can be, and how beneficial they'll be for them in the long run.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Curtis. Thank you. I see Jessica. I want to get some couple more questions in before we end, but go ahead.
I actually didn't necessarily have a question. I just wanted to comment on that because I have a 4-year-old and I've long been thinking like, okay, when do I tell him about some of the realities of the world, right? Like we already, talk about skin color, and I love that like he goes to a diverse school and that's a priority. And so we talk about, and I try and celebrate with him, like, oh, isn't it so cool that your friends have different color skin? Like, and I, talk to him about his color skin and my color skin, how even those are different from each other. So I appreciate, you talking about your family and how there's the different colors and things. But I, as we came upon Juneteenth, I was thinking, okay, do I talk to him about this now? Because I have to then define slavery. And when is it, like, I mean, that's an awful thing. So when do you break, a child's like innocence in that way of like trying to create this positive view of the world and like how you can navigate it and all this? When do you start to kind of maybe like pull back the cover and say like the curtain and share some of the ugly pieces, So I kind of took a chance and started to like talk to him a little bit about it and try to describe Juneteenth, and I let him kind of ask the questions too.
Mhm.
And I found like the most difficult part was like just choosing the right words, So in my head I'm like, we think about slavery and the physical nature of the treatment and like how poor, like how like brutal, right? And so I'm like, okay, do I want to get to that level yet? Do I want to talk to him about the brutality yet? Maybe not. Let's like tiptoe into it. And I actually found like he got it a lot more than I would have expected. And so it was kind of a chance, like, let's just try this and see what he can understand. Let's see what questions he has. And it has now led to like more conversations. And so it's been kind of neat to see what you can do with a child that young, like how you can talk to them about it. Because I do think, like I said, like there's always that question of, are they too young? When are they old enough? When can they understand? And of course there's some, level of individuality to that. When are they mature enough, to handle certain things and everything. But I don't know, I guess my lesson is just try and see.
Well, and one thing, Jessica, just to, and I'm sorry to interrupt you here, but a lot of times there are these narratives, and they are brutal and they are so harsh, right? And there's also a very, they're wonderful narratives of resilience. So why don't we shift into that, right? Into the stories of resilience and being able to showcase how resilient those folks are. It's not that you are going to ignore or not talk about the reality of slavery. And there are so many other stories that have not even been shared that can really demonstrate how resilient our community is, right?
That's an awesome point. There's a book called When We Were Alone, which is about Native Indigenous people and the treatment that they had experienced. And it focuses on that. So I love that. That's a great point.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I see Mrs. Melendez, and we're gonna, I know that there's a lot more questions, and I promise we'll come back to this topic again in the fall, but we're gonna have Mrs. Melendez be our last question for this particular session.
Awesome, thank you so much. I do not have a question, I just wanna make a comment. So I have been a teacher for over 15 years, and I have been in various grade levels. And when it comes to the question about talking to children about race, it starts pretty early. It all depends on the teacher. It all depends what's happening at the district level. For example, in my case, just like Charlize, I have like this Dominican tight hair, long and beautiful, and my daughter is like that. So I tell you that the conversation about diversity and differences, it started really early in my home because my child would go to daycare and notice that, wait, mommy, but I look different. I am different. And when it comes about teaching, I taught diversity in kindergarten. Children notice. And Jessica, let me tell you that it all depends on the child. If it's a black and brown child, like my daughter, you got to start the conversation really early because they go through experiences that you need to explain why certain things happened when they are around certain people. Some children are sheltered and they could be in high school right now. And this is the first time that they're having the conversation about race and diversity and our differences. And there are children right now that, let me tell you, they are all the way in college and they have not had a single conversation about race and diversity. And I'll be honest, I am so proud to hear, Mom, Clara, that you have done such a great work with Charlize, but also as a mother and as an educator, it breaks my heart to know that we have thousands and thousands of children in classrooms throughout the United States where there is not a single book on diversity, a single book that reflects who we are, who my child is, the way that you look. So I tell you right now, if you are a mom or a dad or a parent, a grandparent, talking to your child about race and diversity and acceptance, you are doing such a great favor. You are facilitating life. You are paving the path for a more acceptable life and friendship and overall. So the conversation, honestly, too, something brief that I want to say. I know that we are past 1 o'clock. In my house too, when my daughter came home really early on, talking to me about, wait, mommy, why do I look like this? And my friend next door has this beautiful blonde hair, and then like, you have to spend hours doing mine. She doesn't do that. I went back to listen to some beliefs of the Bible, and I'm like, and how we are created unique and how we are different. And I mean, we are Christians at home. My child, everything that I do is also based around my religion, but overall acceptance. And I'm just so proud. My daughter is doing so well, and she has a great amount of friends that are very diverse, and they all understand that we are different and that we need to be proud of who we are.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Such an important message. I know that was something really that kind of like just dropped a quick comment on there, how these types of conversations in the classrooms are under attack, right? There are folks out there that don't want us to have these conversations. We need to push back. We need to push back and be able to not only have these conversations, insist on this type of conversation happening in classrooms, and being able to have these conversations at home and learning. There are times when I'm learning right along with my child, and that is okay. We don't have to have all of the answers, but not stopping because somebody's telling us that this is not something that they want to have, and not normalize and not be able to share in a curriculum or in a classroom or in spaces where important conversations like these need to be had. So once again, thank you all for being with us today. Thank you, Charlize, for really sharing from your perspective. Chris, for your amazing, I know the research that you did really came through in the questions and the way that you navigated this conversation. So thank you. And as I mentioned, in the fall, we are looking to bring this conversation back. So please be on the lookout for that. And then the last thing I will share is that we will be back in the M Room on the 29th. So look out for the invitation for that conversation. So thank you again, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Take care, everyone.
Bye.